All right, let's get right into a story that honestly feels like it was ripped from a spy novel. It's about a brilliant teenager, a series of impossible calculations, and a single decision where the only outcomes were, quite literally, life or death. So, picture this. It's midnight in Hong Kong, July 17th, 2016. An 18-year-old kid is standing at a door, knocking. But it's not his hotel room, it's the South Korean consulate. The stakes could not be higher. You see, just a day before, he was a national hero for North Korea, a silver medalist on the world stage. Now, he's a fugitive. And right here is where this story gets really interesting. This is not your typical defection. He wasn't escaping poverty or a jail cell. No, this young man was a prodigy, and he was running from the future the state had meticulously planned for him, a future where he would become one of its most dangerous weapons. So, to really get why he would risk absolutely everything, we have to look back at the system that created him and the terrifying future it had in store. Meet Ri Jong-yol. By the time he was 7 years old, he'd already blown through the entire elementary school math curriculum. But you have to understand, in North Korea, a mind like that isn't seen as a gift to be nurtured. It's a resource, a tool to be exploited by the state. He wasn't a person, he was an asset. And wow, what an asset he was. His rise was just meteoric. By 15, he was just wiping the floor with everyone at the national competitions. A year later, he's on the national team. And for 4 straight years, he brings home silver medals from the most prestigious high school math competition on the entire planet. For a regime starving for any kind of international validation, he was a propaganda dream come true. So what was waiting for him after that final medal? There was no choice of university, no career path he could pick. Nope, the state had already decided for him. Best case scenario, he becomes a state-sponsored hacker, stealing billions of dollars to fund Kim Jong-un's missile programs. The worst case, he's locked deep underground in some bunker, serving as a human calculator for the nuclear weapons program. Just imagine that, a lifetime of total isolation, doing the regime's darkest work. So this chilling, predetermined fate, it forced him to make the single most dangerous calculation of his entire life. And this wasn't a calculation based just on fear. It was fueled by these brief, intoxicating glimpses he'd had of another world. During those international trips, Ri saw things that were just completely unimaginable back home. Teenagers from other countries just laughing freely, browsing an uncensored, limitless internet. He even became friends with his rivals on the South Korean team. And every time he had to go back to Pyongyang, he said it felt like descending into a tomb. He decided he had to run. In a huge break with protocol, he told one person, his father, the very math teacher who had discovered his talent in the first place. And in this just incredible act of love and defiance, his father gave him his blessing and $200. This was an act of treason that could have gotten their entire family for 3 generations executed or sent to a prison camp. And remember, he made this life or death decision when he was just 18 years old. And all he had to pull it off was $200. On top of that, he had no passport, no phone, no identification of any kind. All he had were his wits, that silver medal as proof of who he was, and a plan that was, let's be honest, a total long shot. Okay, so this brings us to the night itself. The competition is over, the team is booked on a flight back to Pyongyang the next afternoon. Ri knew this was it. He had one and only one window of opportunity. And his plan, it was just so simple, which really shows you how desperate he was. Step 1, sneak out of the dorm. Step 2, get to the airport, a place just swarming with international travelers. And step 3, find a South Korean national, anyone, who could help him get in touch with the consulate. He didn't even know where the consulate was. The airport was his only hope. So at 2 a.m., he puts the plan in motion. His heart is just pounding in his chest. He slides out of bed, fully dressed, and just inches the door open. He pads silently down this deserted hallway, slips right past a sleeping security guard, and then steps out into the warm, humid Hong Kong air. For the very first time in his entire life, he is completely, totally alone. He manages to flag down a taxi and gets to the airport. Inside, he spots the Korean air check-in counter. He walks up to a supervisor, takes a deep breath, and says the words that will change everything. The supervisor is, of course, stunned, but she quickly calls her manager, who then makes the call to the South Korean consulate. So Ri makes it to the consulates, and they rush him inside. He's on South Korean sovereign territory. He thinks he's safe. He thinks he's done it. But what he doesn't realize is that his personal escape is about to explode into a high-stakes, international incident because he's still on Chinese soil. He would spend the next 70 days trapped inside that building. His sanctuary had just become a gilded cage, while three powerful nations argued over his fate. And this lays out the geopolitical chess match perfectly. You had South Korea, who was determined to protect him. Then you had North Korea, who was absolutely furious, demanding the return of their property and claiming he'd been kidnapped. And caught right in the middle was China, desperately trying not to anger either side, while their plainclothes police surrounded the building to make sure Ri couldn't go anywhere. For over 2 months, Ri just paced back and forth in a windowless storage room, jogging on a treadmill for exercise, completely cut off from everything, as diplomats argued. And then, finally, a breakthrough. Beijing, who was quietly annoyed with North Korea's recent missile tests anyway, gave the secret green light. Ri was given a new South Korean passport with a new name, Ri Jong-yol. He was escorted to the airport and put on a plane to Seoul. And it was only when the wheels of that plane left the Hong Kong runway that he finally truly let out his breath. He was free. And in South Korea, his brilliance just continued to shine. He adapted incredibly quickly, got into a top science high school, and then was admitted to Seoul National University to keep studying math. He could browse any website he wanted, walk anywhere he wanted. But this incredible freedom came at a staggering cost. He hasn't had any contact with his family since that day, and he knows he probably never will again. Ria's defection sent absolute shockwaves through Pyongyang. The regime was so humiliated by the loss of one of its brightest stars that it actually pulled its team from the International Math Olympiad for the next 2 years. They just couldn't risk another one of their prodigies calculating their own path to freedom. Ri Jong-yol, who is now Ri Jong-ho, traded his entire past for a future he could finally call his own. But his story really leaves us with this one haunting question. How many other brilliant minds are trapped inside North Korea right now, calculating their own desperate equations and trying to solve for that one variable that matters more than anything else: freedom?